Welcome back, Honors 317, Essentials for Life, Air and Water. And in this set of video clips, it's going to be a slideshow with some PowerPoints and then some videos that characterize some of the major issues affecting our water availability right here in the United States. So the first image that I have up here is the Water Supply Sustainability Index, and this is parts of the United States by 2050 with the influence of climate change that potentially may be withdrawing more water resources than they currently have availability. And you can even see in parts of the Mississippi River Basin, or right there along the main stem, there are areas that are looking at facing serious water challenges, water shortages. We also see throughout much of the Great Plains, what we call the nation's breadbasket, some areas where there's some potential issues, and then the entire Southwest. So these are some serious concerns. Getting at putting some reality to that, you would have already possibly seen the video that focused on the Colorado River Basin, which the Colorado starts right up here at Rocky Mountain National Park, not too far from the Wyoming border. The upper parts of the Colorado start here, and then they flow all the way down here, and where we actually see it flow into Tijuana and then into the Gulf of California. And you know from that video that the Colorado River doesn't even necessarily flow all the way to the ocean anymore. The same river that's responsible for producing the massive Grand Canyon doesn't have enough water to go all the way to the ocean. In this video, we're going to not only discuss that particular issue, we'll also discuss the Ogallala Aquifer and some of the challenges that they face. So I don't want to try to be a downer, but at the same time, it's really important to be understanding of how we have to be better stewards of our water, because water is a very precious resource and it's limited. It is finite. It takes a long time for us to replenish what we've got. So moving on, in the Southwest, we learned a lot. Some of the first challenges with water shortages showed up with the city of Los Angeles. Los Angeles Water and Power was one of the first lawsuits that ever happened in the United States on environmental laws related to water. The city of Los Angeles actually was running short on water, so they tapped into Mono Lake and Owens Lake, these lakes up in the north central region of their state, not far from Yosemite, and pulled that water down hundreds of miles of aqueduct. And this is an example of what these aqueduct structures look like. They were not covered, so a lot was lost to evaporation going through the desert all the way to Los Angeles. And eventually what ended up happening was Mono Lake had this little island that these birds lived on, and as the lake continued to dry up more and more and more, predators could then make it onto the island and decimate bird species. And there were a lot of bird species that were lost because of the drying up of these lakes, all because the city of Los Angeles had insufficient water. And Los Angeles Water and Power still holds water rights and has water access to other areas of the state far beyond Los Angeles' boundaries. Los Angeles isn't the only place in the United States that's had these water challenges. As we look to Atlanta, just northeast of Atlanta is Lake Sidney Lanier, one of the headwaters of the Chattahoochee River. The Chattahoochee River, some people may know the song Alan Jackson made famous. The Chattahoochee River flows throughout much of Alabama and comes out just south of Gulfport, Mississippi. And the Chattahoochee River is a main stem, a lifeline for much of the state of Alabama. There was a drought not too long ago, and the Army Corps of Engineers continued to have to let water out of their reservoirs so the Chattahoochee could continue to flow. Some people at Lake Lanier wanted to be able to continue to fish and have higher reservoir levels, but the Corps continued to let water out because There are people downstream that depend upon that river. There's hydropower that's dependent upon that river. So this was not an issue for just the Southwest. Even the Southeast has had major drought problems in recent history that have had impacts. So we're going to discuss the hydrologic cycle here in a little bit, and we'll also discuss here shortly some of the issues that face the actual Midwest related to the aquifer. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because you've seen this possibly through middle school or high school, but in the grand scheme of things, what happens? We know that there's a lot of water in the oceans. The ocean water gets evaporated, also evaporation on land. As the water evaporates and transpiration off the underside of leaves, transpiration from plants even in the water, as the water goes off as vapor, evaporation and transpiration, it can make the clouds. The clouds hopefully end up over top of dry land, and then it rains on dry land and waters the soil and waters our lakes and rivers so that we continue to have fresh water available. Some of that goes down into the ground and infiltrates into the ground, and some of it can be exiting through groundwater, through seeps and springs. Some of it stays down there and recharges the groundwater. So those are just some major points about the hydraulic and hydrologic cycle. So transpiration is the return of water to the atmosphere through plant vapor. Evaporation is just the water turning into water vapor. This is an ET meter. It measures simultaneously evaporation and transpiration because physical scientists, for the most part, just care about, the combined measure of those, and it's just easier to measure both at the same time and not try to differentiate which is which. Now, aquifers. What makes something an aquifer? So when I was a kid and I first learned about aquifers, a school teacher that I had, she kind of led us on to believe that aquifers were kind of like these giant underground caves. And there was a movie that was popular back then called Goonies. And, there was a scene in it that every kid remembered where this giant pirate ship is somehow underground. Well, anyways, in Goonies, you've got this underground cavern that might be something that looks more like Mammoth Cave. And yes, you can have cavernous underground storages of water that are cave-like. They do exist, but by and large, most aquifers are actually these spongy soil, rocky layers that nobody could ever actually physically go into, but we could drill into or tap. So aquifers are always underground, sometimes free-flowing, but generally it's that water that comprises the small amounts of water filling porous spaces in underground soil and rock. Groundwater seeps continuously out of the ground to also charge streams. So where it runs out the side of an area where maybe there's a rock layer and the water comes down, hits a rock layer, it might flow out to a stream or a hillside and form a spring or a seep. And that water can keep the water flowing into our creeks and rivers year round, and we call that base flow. And base flow is present in this part of the country. Out west, streams run dry. But base flow is always present in the east in many of our streams, and we continue to have water in our streams and rivers. Now, as we talk more about aquifers, we're going to talk about a major aquifer here in the United States. And before I go into too much detail on that, it's important for us to understand that underground we have sometimes thicker soil, maybe clay, or sometimes even rock that traps finer particles, or not finer, but more broken up particles, and water can get stuck in between them, and this is where we can draw water. So you can think that as the water comes down to the surface, it might get first trapped here, and any water that goes up against this confining layer. It could be rocky or it could be really tight clay. Water doesn't make it down through it very easily, so the water gets trapped and fills up from the bottom up. And it's trapped, filling up this pore space, and you could theoretically pump water from it or have a well that you don't even need to pump, where if there's enough pressure and you're at a low enough elevation, you can actually get an artesian well. However, sometimes there's decades-long water that's trapped below this confining layer, and you can actually drill through that and actually pump from deeper sources. We're going to pull up a clip here of the Ogallala Aquifer. I'm going to pull that up here in the next video so that you can get an understanding of some of the issues that are facing people in the Great Plains. So I'm going to stop this video, and in the next video we'll discuss the Ogallala Aquifer.